Which Denver Broncos players on offense or defense do we have our eyes on in Friday's preseason opener against the Arizona Cardinals? You're going to get that and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Broncos football is back as preseason week 1 is here. The Denver Broncos are in Arizona set to take on the Cardinals on Friday evening. That's going to be an 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time kickoff. Who are some players to watch on offense or defense, and what do we want to see from the starters? You're going to get that on today's brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. Special shout out to all the everydayers out there as well. Make sure you subscribe or follow down below for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss out on what's going on with the Denver Broncos. Every single day, all year long, we have you covered. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there, LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Sayre, Bedinger, my friend, the wait is finally over. Broncos football is back. Preseason action coming up here against the Arizona Cardinals. For me, I always like it because I've been watching these guys go against each other in practice every single day. And I know, just talking to players, they're ready to take things out on somebody, not their teammates, so that they can showcase maybe some of the growth they've demonstrated here in the offseason. It all boils down to Friday night's game, my friend. And you know what? Let's kick things off with what everybody wants to know. Players on the offensive side of the ball that we're excited to see. We're going to share our thoughts. A couple Broncos fans sent their thoughts in as well. I'm going to let you start things off here on today's episode of the show, my friend.
Right. I love it, Cody. We got some great responses from the listeners of the show, obviously. And look, I think that we'd be remiss if we didn't mention some of the obvious names, right? Russell Wilson, of course. We're going to be excited to watch Russ play for the 15 or whatever snaps he's going to play. We're kind of talking more so, though, the guys that are going to get maybe extensive action in this game, right? Everybody wants to see the starters. We all understand that. But beyond that, who are maybe some of these sleepers or second string, third string guys fighting for roster spots? I want to start off by talking about the two backup quarterbacks, Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci. I'm always very excited to evaluate quarterback play, especially when it comes to the preseason. You just don't get the opportunity to see these guys very often, Cody. So how does Jarrett Stidham look? We know that Sean Payton really spoke highly of him, said that quietly it was one of the most important moves they made in free agency. This is somebody that I think now we know that the Broncos buy his kind of starter potential going forward. He's somebody I'm very, very excited to see, as well as Ben DiNucci, who you have said kind of having an underrated training camp, had a couple of really good days this past week. So Ben DiNucci, how does he look out there? Does he force the Broncos to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster? Because I think you and I kind of both feel right now that there might be a chance the Broncos do exactly that. So, Cody, I'm looking forward to seeing those two backup quarterbacks playing. And I'll also quickly, Cody, you mentioned we have fan engagement on the show. I want to say a quick shout out to O'Shea, who's going to obviously see the game, as we saw in our comment section the other day. So very excited for the youngster to get the chance to watch their first game in person. And really pumped for you guys. So enjoy that experience and let us know, hey, will you see Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci in person, how they play?
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. And if you're going to the game, make sure you let us know on social media. Tell us about your experience. Take pictures. We always love to hear that from Broncos Country here. And I think a lot of this, too, when we do these players to watch in the preseason, you nailed it there by saying, everyone wants to hear about Russell Wilson, the starters. Obviously, that's a given. But I always think it's important that we highlight and we talk about players who maybe nobody's talking about enough, right? The not so obvious names here. So for me, I'm going to go at wide receiver. I'm going to go with Montrell Washington on the offensive side of the ball for somebody to keep an eye on here in Broncos Country. He's had a very, very good training camp, and he's caught bombs from Jarrett Stidham. He's caught bombs downfield from Ben DiNucci. I imagine we're going to see him have some opportunities to do the same thing here in the preseason, but also he's competing for that returner job. Now, while the unofficial depth chart says that Marvin Mims is the guy there right now, it's really fluid between these two for that role. And if Marvin Mims makes the active roster, you need a player who can fit into the design role that he has in the offense. And so Montreal Washington is auditioning for a roster spot here. I'm going to go with him, but then I would be remiss if I don't talk about the guy who's been consistently good all throughout training camp and OTAs, Jaleel McLaughlin, the undrafted rookie free agent running back. Is he and Tyler Badie both received a lot of praise from offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi. We're going to see Jaleel actually be able to do this stuff in a game. And that's the hope, right? Like, he's been having an explosive big run in practice every single day. Now that you're playing in the preseason against somebody else, can you do it against another team? To me, if Jaleel can replicate that, I guarantee you some Broncos fans who may not know who he is, because there are some out there who don't know who he is. I've ran into a few. He is an exciting player to watch. I mean, we giggle up on the hill watching every time. Every time he breaks a run, it's like, Jaleel, he just got things that you just can't coach. He's got speed. He's got good vision. He's got good ball carrier skills. And despite being a little undersized, he plays so physical. So for me, I'm going to highlight Jaleel McLaughlin. And look, Broncos Country, always eager as you're watching on YouTube or listening wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you share your thoughts with us as well on social media at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Lockdown Broncos, or in the YouTube comment section down below. But let's get to some fans who sent in their suggestions as well, some players that they have their eye on the offensive side of the ball. Let's start off with our good friend, the Oracle, Zon B21. Now, I went with Jaleel McLaughlin. He's going with Tyler Badie here at running back.
I know Zon has been very high on Tyler Badie for a while now. Cody really projecting him into that running back 3 role, as we've been having discussions on Twitter all throughout the offseason. So very excited to see Tyler Badie as well. And for those of you who maybe you don't have a roster or anything like that, you got to know the players' numbers here. Badie 36, McLaughlin 38. Those guys will be in focus big time in this preseason game. So love that call out from Zon. And that is one of the biggest things. Like, as we talk about, if you want to talk storylines for this preseason game, running back 3 is that. And it feels to me, even though the depth chart may not reflect exactly where things are at right now, we know it's in pencil, feels to me like Tyler Badie is kind of the leader in the clubhouse for that, with Jaleel kind of nipping at his heels, and Tony Jones Jr. is a we'll see. I think obviously Kinley, Cody, one of our great pals of the show here, agrees with you about Jaleel McLaughlin as well. So everybody wants to see these running backs do well, but are they going to be able to do well without guys like Isaiah Prince, who Dwayne, shout out to Dwayne for listening, watching the show.
Dude.
Yeah, I love it. Isaiah Prince is Dwayne's pick for a player to watch offensively in this game. And these backs are going to need Isaiah Prince and the rest of these backup offensive linemen to do their job if we're going to get a really good look at these guys. So nothing matters in terms of, well, how do the quarterbacks look? How do the running backs look? How do the receivers look? It starts with the offensive line doing their job to be able to give you a good look in a preseason game. I really like that sneaky pick from Dwayne, Isaiah Prince, especially after what you said, Cody. He had a really good practice there on Wednesday, playing in relief of Mike McGlinchey. So really excited to see these backup offensive linemen, and specifically Isaiah Prince.
And you need to get a good evaluation on your backup tackles here in the preseason, because Sayre, like if Mike McGlinchey, who's going to be out for a few weeks, let's say an injury lingers or pops up, you need to have trust and you need to have faith. Okay, hey, this guy behind him can step in. Now, Cam Fleming's going to be in the mix as well with that. But you want to see if these two guys here, we talked about it before training camp even began, can these two guys be the 2 backups behind Garrett Bowles and Mike McGlinchey? You want to see, can they perform? Can they play well? What do they look like within the scheme? This is going to be your best chance to see that without an injury happening to a starter. This is the best chance to do just that. Now, we've highlighted players on the offensive side of the ball that we are watching for in Friday's preseason game against the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to talk about the defensive side of the ball, because there seems to be a lot of players out there that could have a big impact on this game that we're very excited seeing about, various position competitions. We'll dive deep into that, and you'll get that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there, LinkedIn Jobs. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And in just minutes, you can create a free job post at LinkedIn Jobs. You add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile, and that spreads word that you're hiring. They also have simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. Make sure you finish out the year strong with the right team member through LinkedIn Jobs. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
All three levels of the Denver Broncos defense will present a varying level of intrigue and interest as you get to see them play against the Arizona Cardinals on Friday night. So who did Cody and I pick for our defensive players to watch? Who did you, the listeners of the show, pick for your defensive players to watch in this game? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk all about the pass rushers, the linebackers, the defensive backs. But before we do that, from Cody and I, we just got to say a huge mile-high salute to every single one of you that makes Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day, wherever and however you listen to podcasts, free and available everywhere, Cody. Anywhere that you bring us in the car, you bring us on your workout, on the treadmill, while you're lifting weights, if you're mowing the lawn, listening to Locked On Broncos. Thanks for bringing us with you. And if you're just watching the show on YouTube, thank you so much for participating, for watching, for subscribing, supporting us however you do that. We love engaging with you. I love, Cody, reading the comments every single day and engaging with some of them as well. I love going on Twitter and seeing people give their responses to this question. Like, who are you interested to see play in this game? Who are you most looking forward to watching? I think this is an opportunity for the fans to kind of show, hey, I called it. I was there from the beginning, just like our Alex Singleton fan from last year, right? So who do you have, though, Cody? We'll get to the fans' responses here in a bit. Who would you say, though, is maybe one or two defensive players that you have big time in focus for this game, guys who are going to play a substantial amount of snaps?
Well, the first guy that I'm going to go with here is outside linebacker Nik Bonitto, who has turned in just a tremendous training camp so far, has been great in practice. But the biggest thing now, the only obstacle I think that we have to try to figure out, can he clear that hurdle? Can he do it in a game? Can he do these things consistent against an offensive scheme he hasn't seen much of throughout training camp? His motor, his timing in terms of determining when this ball is going to be snapped, he's been very disciplined in that regard. He's been good against the run on the outside. He's setting the edge. These are some things that he was critiqued on coming into the NFL that he needed to do. He just looks like he's much more confident in his ability. And he even did an interview with the Broncos, and he talked about how Vance Joseph has given him more confidence in himself and understands how to use him. So for me, I'm excited to see, can Nik Bonitto carry it over and do what he's been doing all throughout training camp here in this preseason game against guys like Colt McCoy or Clayton Tune. No Kyler Murray, obviously, in this game for the Cardinals, but it's a good test. Another opponent, it's another means to get tape to evaluate. And Nik Bonitto, I think, is a guy who's definitely surpassed the expectations that we had previously in training camp. We said he had probably the most pressure on a young player coming into camp. He's exceeded that. He's done a tremendous job. Nik Bonitto is that one guy. And then I'm going to go on the secondary here. I'm going to go with PJ Locke. We just heard from Vance Joseph early on in this week about where PJ is at and how much growth and maturity he's seen from him from the spring until now. Not only is PJ the Broncos' best special teams player, but now he's really in competition with Kareem Jackson for that third safety role here on the roster. And while the unofficial depth chart says Caden Stearns / Kareem Jackson, Kareem's going to have to compete for this job with PJ. And PJ has continued, I think, from coming in 2019. And when you've seen him on the field, he has continued to ascend from a developmental standpoint year over year. That's what you want to see in the NFL. He's got a great opportunity to go run with that. So with that, I'm going to open it all up to you now, Sayre. Who are some players, if you can give me one or two names that you have your eyes on in Friday's game?
I'm going to start with a guy that me and Jason Kennedy, listener or watcher, are both of the show. Jason Kennedy and I both looking forward to seeing Drew Sanders in this game, Cody. And really, it boils down to so much more than just watching him rack up tackles. Like, he got the pressure player label at the draft, at the time of the draft. So what does that mean? That means that the Broncos feel like this is a guy that can rush the quarterback from a variety of different spots on the field. Yes, he's an off-ball linebacker, but he's going to be moving around, in my opinion. At least that's kind of what I'm hoping to see from a guy who's 6'5", 240 plus pounds or whatever he is, Cody, to use that size, that range, to not just pigeonhole him to one spot, but to really move him around the defensive formation. Obviously, there's only so much that you want to give away in the preseason, but I want to see Drew Sanders making some plays out there, as this is an opportunity for him to prove I can have a regular season role on this defense. I know you guys got Singleton. I know you guys got Josie Jewell, but I can come in here and I can do some things for you. I can do something different to get on the field and make an impact, especially with Baron Browning on the PUP potentially to start the season, Cody, which could keep him out up to 2 months or so. So this is what I want to see. Drew Sanders getting after the quarterback. I want to see him playing well in space, playing in coverage, doing those different types of things, playing with instincts, playing aggressively. You want to see Drew Sanders go out there and have a big game, especially with some of the hype he got early in the offseason. And on top of that, I'm looking forward to seeing our guy, Jaquan McMillian. I know you've talked him up quite a bit. We've talked him up on this show a lot, and we're ready to see him go out there and play. Like you mentioned, these guys are going up against Colt McCoy, Clayton Tune. All due respect to those guys, I want to see the defensive backs make life really difficult for those quarterbacks, because this is an opportunity for McMillian to prove why the Broncos, even if it's in pencil, they listed him right behind Pat Surtain II on their initial depth chart. So he's somebody that they obviously believe in as somebody that can contribute in case of injury at the very least, or at best, maybe in the rotation, getting onto the field in certain packages and situations. I'm very excited to see Jaquan McMillian and what he brings to the table.
Well, let's get to some fan responses now who sent them in on Twitter. Mac Graphics on Twitter, avid listener of the show, says Delonte Hood. I'm curious about Delonte Hood as well, because he's had a little bit of a quietly good training camp, because the cornerback position, how often are you getting tested when teams are trying to get their in the middle of the field game going? They're going to take some shots on the outside, but when he has been tested, Delonte Hood has come up with some big pass breakups in third down and red zone. I'm excited to see him carry things over here. Broncos_Baines on Twitter says Nik Bonitto as well, kind of in agreement with me. And Matt Urbanski says Matt Henningsen, the Matt-to-Matt connection there. How does Henningsen look here in his second preseason campaign? Can he make some noise there? Can he maybe compete with Jonathan Harris for a spot starting at defensive end? Or is he going to be primed for a positional, rotational role? These are some interesting things to kind of watch for here as the training camp continues, as preseason game number 1 approaches. I mean, it's all going to go by quickly. And then guess what? The regular season is here. We'll have so much to break down every step of the way to lead you through the preseason, into the regular season, and even throughout the offseason. Locked On Broncos has you covered every single day, all year long. But our conversation doesn't end right there with players to watch on offense or defense. We want to talk about, what do we want to see from the starters in the first preseason action on Friday against the Arizona Cardinals? Well, Broncos Country, you're going to get that on today's episode of Locked On Broncos. Real quick, you make Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. But for your second listen of the day after this episode of the show, make sure you go check out the Locked On NFL podcast, with preseason games being played all around the NFL. What are some of the biggest stories, the biggest headlines, the biggest position battles that are coming to a forefront in terms of revealing who's going to start at quarterback? And for certain teams, Locked On NFL has you covered, local experts on the biggest stories. Check it out today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. What are 3 things to watch for the Broncos starters against the Arizona Cardinals? And maybe even not just the starters, but overarching in terms of what you want to see from a Sean Payton-led team. We're going to discuss that here just real quick. Wanted to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. Just a daily reminder, if you've not yet subscribed or followed this show, make sure you do so for free wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch us on YouTube for free as well. Sayre, I'm going to start things off here. Maybe kind of the first thing to watch for the Broncos in Friday night's game against the Cardinals. It's going to be on NFL Network, or if you live in Denver, it's going to be available locally on 9 News. That's 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time kickoff. For those of you that are wondering, I think you can also listen to it on NFL Plus for free as the preseason goes on, or you can watch it there as well. How do the starters look in the 15 to 18 snaps that Sean Payton said that they're going to get? I think that's a really big question, because you could have one drive where it's 12 or 13 plays, and then all of a sudden the next drive you just get 2 more plays, and then Sean Payton yanks you out. Like, hopefully that is the case for Denver. Hopefully the offense has a 12-play drive where they take like 8 or 9 minutes off the clock and score, and then you could be satisfied with that. But I think the overall volume in these 15 to 18 snaps, both offensively, defensively, and even in special teams, you're going to have to do that because there's starters, perceived guys there on those units, but there's also a rotation for guys competing as well. How do these guys look? Are there any penalties? Are there any missed assignments, right? That's the one thing that Sean Payton doesn't want to see because look, the Broncos offense specifically this week, they've had a really great practice in terms of operational efficiency, getting the ball out of your hands quickly if you're Russell Wilson, good blocks in the interior to set up the run game. How can you do that against an opponent, against a scheme that you have not yet gone against? That, I think, is what really tests for the Broncos here offensively, defensively, special teams, where their foundation is. Because if you can do it against your defense, you should be able to do it against other defenses as well, no matter if they throw a different scheme look at you.
Exactly. I think that's a great point, and those are all great things to watch for, Cody, especially when the starters are out there. You want to see this team execute. You want to see them play as mistake-free as possible, especially as we've talked about, doing the simple things well, right? The Broncos really struggled at doing simple things well last year. So how much better do they look in terms of just operating a short passing game? I think that just something as simple as that is something that I'm going to be interested in because as tough as it was sledding for the Broncos running the ball last season, it was equally tough knowing that you didn't really have a short passing game to lean on when your running game wasn't able to get going because you couldn't do either of those things. And then all of a sudden, all you got are these deep shot plays. How does the short passing game look now with Sean Payton calling the shots as opposed to Nathaniel Hackett and his staff? Because that was a huge issue last season for the Broncos. It was non-existent. So I'm looking for that. And like you said, just hitting your assignments in the blocking department. How well do these like Ben Powers, Quinn Miners, how big of a difference do they make early on in this game in terms of, are we noticing that interior pressure? Are we noticing a bigger push from the interior line? Everybody's going to be fascinated to see Lloyd Cushenberry. Does he look better or is he getting blown off the ball? There's a lot of different facts. And of course, everything that we're talking about here has mostly to do with the offense, right? We haven't even barely touched it on the defense because we feel like, man, over the last 6-7 years, the defense has borderline been on autopilot, hasn't it? It's just been something that it's going to be good every year. It feels like the Broncos are going to have a good defense. How does Vance Joseph's scheme look? I guess I know now we know that it's basically he's pulling from last year, maybe some coverage concepts that he's run in the past, but keeping that base defense from Vic Fangio and Ejiro Evero. What does it actually look like? What can we glean from what it actually looks like? Who's rotating in with the top guys? So there's a lot to pay attention to when the starters are out there. That's when I know you're gonna have your physical notebook out, Cody, taking notes during the game and marking down which guys where, and then we'll actually be able to talk about that kind of stuff, right? Because it's going to be on TV, not at training camp practice. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Well, and here's a disclaimer as well. I always, this is how I operate because I have to go back. Like I see my initial things when I watch the game, but I have to go back and I have to watch the game again, or I have to watch the all 22 before I can make real definitive conclusions, right? You may see a negative play and then everyone on Twitter or the instant reaction be, oh, it's this guy's fault. We have to, like, that's why I'm always like, hey, give it 24 hours. Let's go back. Let's rewatch it. Let's reanalyze it. Because I think that's the responsible thing to do. So, you're never going to get the drastic overreaction here on this podcast. You're never going to get too low or anything like that. We're just going to try to stay in the medium to be as objective as possible about things. But yeah, let things play out. You have to go back and do some rewatches versus just looking at the outcome of one play and automatically, oh, it's that guy's fault. Get rid of him. We see that every year. I just wanted to talk about that. The second thing I think we should definitely watch for that is exciting is really out of all the rookies, whether you draft them, whether they're rookie free agents, who has the biggest impact on the game. And I'm a little bummed out that unfortunately we don't get to see Riley Moss here in the preseason because that was one player I really wanted to see what he can do at the secondary level at corner, maybe even working inside the nickel a little bit here in the preseason. Him losing these snaps, it's not his fault. There's nothing he could have done about the core muscle thing. It's just unfortunate here. So you're looking forward to seeing what rookie does have the biggest impact. I know a lot of Broncos fans are excited about Marvin Mims as well.
Yes, rightfully so, right? Is he going to be out there returning punts? Is he going to be lining up in the slot? Are they going to send him for a deep shot? That's another thing that I'm interested to find out too, Cody. When the starters are out there, the scripted plays. What kind of plays are they scripting up, right? Because we kind of assume it'll be vanilla type stuff, but you never know when a wrinkle is going to get thrown in there, just to say, hey, keep your eye out for this kind of thing, and then all of a sudden you can use that preseason tape as misdirection in the regular season. So I'm fascinated to see what the script looks like, and especially for these rookies. As you talk, we talked about Drew Sanders. We're all excited to see him. Marvin Mims, I kind of feel like gets a little underrated because, well, he plays at kind of what was a stacked position, and now his role is very much a question mark or a wild card because Tim Patrick is no longer going to be playing this season, and KJ Hamler was waived. So now is Marvin Mims like wide receiver 3? Is he wide receiver 4? What is he going to be this season, especially now with Brandon Johnson out for the next couple weeks? Marvin Mims stock may be going way, way up. It may have been kind of just like teetering or almost plateauing there for the majority of the offseason. And now I think you could kind of skyrocket it in terms of what we can expect and in terms of his usage. So very, very excited to see what his involvement is, how quickly they pull him off the field, and what that could mean going forward.
Yeah, I got to get a little special shout out to Taylor Grimes, Incarnate Ward, undrafted wide receiver. This is where I think, and I made this joke before on an episode, just got to hope that Bill Belichick isn't watching this game, because the way that Taylor Grimes moves and maneuvers, he's going to be the next Julian Edelman that they find. And they're going to be like, there we go. We're going to steal him and watch him. He's going to go on to have a terrific career. I'm excited about all these players. You get to see starters, you get to see second, third team guys. And I think for me too, what excites me is I've gotten a chance to see these guys all throughout the offseason, throughout OTAs and minicamp. And one thing I can't really go into great detail on is just it's exciting for me and just my background as a player, as a coach, and my love for the game, watching these guys grow and actually develop in front of me from OTAs all the way through preseason and training camp. I think it's a really cool thing to watch, and obviously rooting for these guys to go out and make the best of the opportunity that is given to them. But Broncos Country, let us know, what are some things that you are looking forward to most seeing in Friday's matchup against the Arizona Cardinals? If you're watching on YouTube, drop it in the comments down below. Like the video, comment for the algorithm, interact with other members of Broncos Country in the comment section. Or if you're listening wherever you get your podcast, you can always tweet us or X us, whatever the hell they call it these days, on social media, at Cody Roark NFL, at Locked On Broncos, at Sayre Bedinger. We appreciate you so much. We'll be back for a brand new episode of the show, a Locked On Broncos, our first post-game report of the year, immediately following the Broncos Cardinals matchup. You can get all that action here on the Locked On Broncos YouTube page or on the podcast wherever you get your podcasts.